All around the world, a war is being waged on and by ships that are vital to the global economy. Thousands of these vessels sail every single day, filled with, for better or worse, something that we just can't live without. I'm talking about oil tankers. For the most part, the war has been silent, waged in the shadows between governments and private companies alike. But in December 2025, things got loud when the United States seized an oil tanker after it left Venezuela, and Ukraine disabled another one in the Black Sea with a drone boat loaded with explosives. These are not the same operation, but they're connected by the same basic idea. If you want leverage in a conflict, messing with the flow of oil is one of the fastest ways to get it. And we've been here before many times. Welcome back to Task and Purpose. I'm Kyle, and today we're going to talk about why oil is behind much of what we are seeing today. We're going to do this by breaking down the original tanker wars in the 1980s between Iran and Iraq, which then escalated into Praying Mantis, and we're going to talk about why we are suddenly seeing tanker seizures and strikes show up again, this time through sanctions enforcement and uncrewed maritime attacks. But before we get to that, a quick word from today's sponsor, Odoo. If you're in manufacturing, you already know the challenges. Orders stack up, delays start sneaking in, all your tools that are supposed to make your life easier start to do the opposite. Odoo fixes that. Odoo gives you one dashboard where you can manage assembly stations, check load times, track work orders, keep up with shipments. Everything that happens on your floor, you can see. Their barcode app makes it easy to scan and log components in real time right from the production line. So you spend less time fixing data errors and more time getting orders out the door. Need to check a worksheet or bill of materials? It's all right there, right in the dashboard, connected and synced. With Odoo, you have everything covered from planning to production with smooth and simple software. Start with your first app for free at odoo.com. That's ODOO.com. You'll be happy you did, and we'd like to thank Odoo for sponsoring today's episode. First, a bit of a disclaimer. If you're here for hyper-political talk, opinions, or general outrage, you're going to be incredibly disappointed. We are presenting information as it is known to us on December 16th at 11:48 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We aren't condoning or condemning any of the things we are talking about. You're more than welcome to do that yourself, but that isn't our job here. Also, when we say tanker war, we don't mean one single war. We mean a pattern of states using commercial oil shipping as a way to apply pressure without taking on a navy head-to-head. Anyway, let's get going. A tanker war isn't really about the ship, it's about what the ship represents. A huge share, around 75% of the oil trade, moves by sea via tankers. If you can disrupt that movement with attacks, seizures, mines, or intimidation, you can force governments and markets to react. For militaries, this matters because it drags navies and coast guards into missions they may not want. Escorts, interdiction, maritime security patrols, and sometimes retaliation. Look no further than the Red Sea, where the Navy faced its most intense fight since World War II as it defended commercial shipping from Houthi attacks. As much as we may not like it, oil has been the keystone in many conflicts going back to World War I as nations began to need it for tanks, airplanes, ships, and submarines. World War II all but cemented oil's role as a major geopolitical flashpoint. After all, Japan's aggression toward the US was due in large part to the 1941 oil embargo placed on it by the US and others after they invaded China and French Indochina, or modern-day Vietnam. Nothing has really changed, and in modern times, the best example is the one everybody half remembers from history class, if you even learned about it at all. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both sides attacked commercial shipping in the Persian Gulf because oil was a major component of both sides' economies. The goal was not subtle. If you can hurt your opponent's economy by cutting off exports or scaring off shippers, you create pressure without having to win a big naval battle. As the attacks piled up, the Gulf turned into a place where a commercial ship could get hit by a missile, struck by a mine, or shot at just because somebody thought it was helping the other side. Eventually, the United States got pulled in when Kuwait, which was aligned with Iraq at the time, asked the US to do something about its tankers being hit. So we started reflagging and escorting Kuwaiti tankers. This became Operation Earnest Will because the US did not want Iran to be able to choke off Gulf shipping, and because Washington had broader interests in keeping oil moving. Once you're escorting tankers through a mine threat, you're already in the fight, you're just pretending you aren't. That escalation became real in April 1988 when the US frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts struck a mine. 4 days later, the US Navy launched Operation Praying Mantis. Praying Mantis was a one-day whooping dealt to Iran in retaliation for the Roberts striking one of their mines. At the end of it all, 2 oil platforms were destroyed, an Iranian frigate, a gunboat, and 3 fast attack boats were sunk, another frigate was hobbled, and an Iranian F-4 was damaged. 57 Iranians were killed, and the US lost 2 Marines when a Cobra helicopter crashed. It was a complete ass-whooping that largely forced Iran to rethink its entire approach to naval power. We actually have a video done on this one that I'm saving for a vacation that I will probably never take, but anyway. The reason Praying Mantis matters today isn't for nostalgia or to tell a story of the US Navy standing on business, as the youths say. It's to show the basic tanker war pattern. Tanker attacks lead to escorts, escorts lead to contact, and contact leads to escalation. Now fast forward to today, where the geography may be different, the tools are different, but the logic is familiar. There are 2 big reasons that tankers are dominating headlines today. The first is sanctions, particularly ones that center around oil. Sanctions turn oil into a political weapon because they don't just target a government, they target the system that turns crude into cash. And for Venezuela, that system generated 58% of the government's budget in 2024, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. In 2017, the US started really tightening those financial screws, restricting the Venezuelan government's and the state-owned PDVSA's ability to raise money in US markets. In 2019, the US escalated by sanctioning PDVSA more directly, aiming to cut off revenue that Washington argues keeps Nicolas Maduro's government afloat. Later that same year, the US expanded sanctions further against the broader Venezuelan government. The details matter less than the practical outcome. When you restrict normal oil trade channels, you push more of the business into workarounds like intermediaries, reflagging, ship-to-ship transfers, and operators willing to accept higher risk for higher profit. If you haven't watched our video on Iran's support to Venezuela, we cover their role in keeping Venezuela's oil industry afloat a little more in depth there, so be sure to check that out if you're interested. Now, there have been off-ramps. The US has periodically used licenses and waivers as leverage, most notably allowing limited operations by companies like Chevron starting in late 2022. Those tightened again when US policy shifted. In early 2025, the US moved to end Chevron's Venezuela authorizations and ordered a wind down. By late 2025, the US was also designating additional Venezuela-linked shipping entities and vessels and, in the Skipper case, physically seizing a tanker after it left Venezuela, which we will talk more about shortly. That's why sanctions pull tankers into the story. If oil exports are restricted, the shipping routes, the ship owners, and the middlemen become part of the conflict because they're the part you can actually touch. So you have sanctions, and then now you have uncrewed systems like we are seeing Ukraine use against Russian tankers. You no longer need a blue water navy to put a ship at risk. Ukraine has showed that very clearly in the Black Sea with uncrewed surface vessels. When you combine sanction pressure with the ability to physically threaten ships at sea, you get tanker war logic without the old school fleet-on-fleet fight. That brings us to what exactly the US is doing in the Caribbean as it pressures Maduro to step down. On December 10, 2025, the U.S. Coast Guard boarded and seized the crude oil tanker MT Skipper on the high seas after it departed Venezuela. This action was carried out after a U.S. judge signed a seizure warrant in late November that was later unsealed by the Department of Justice after the skipper was taken. In the U.S. government's public version of events, this was sanctions enforcement, and it was tied to allegations about an oil shipping network connected to sanctioned actors. In Venezuela's public version of events, it was piracy. Either way, the action itself is the point. A tanker was physically seized. If you're used to sanctions being something that happens to bank accounts and paperwork, a seizure is the moment it stops being abstract and starts being real. Reporting and ship tracking data indicated that multiple tankers changed course or delayed loading plans after the seizure. The risk suddenly outweighed the rewards for these tanker operators. And that's the actual effect the US is trying to create with enforcement. On top of all this, the US Treasury also announced additional sanctions actions tied to Venezuela's oil sector around the same period. You don't have to love sanctions policy to understand the operational goal, which is to increase the costs and risk for the shipping network that keeps sanctioned oil moving. That is how you change behavior without firing a shot. But it also creates a military-relevant question. If the US is willing to seize tankers on the high seas in this context, what happens when a crisis expands? How many resources does it take? How quickly can it scale? And what does it mean for the Coast Guard, which is usually asked to do everything from drug busts to Arctic patrols, and now might be asked to do sanctions enforcement at sea too? Those are all really relevant questions, and we don't really have the answers for them, but hopefully somebody in the government side of things does. That's the US side. Now let's talk about why Ukraine is doing something that looks much more like a war zone. As Ukraine faces setbacks on the battlefield and the Russian invasion drags on, they've been targeting Russia's oil and gas industry to gain any leverage during peace talks. As you can imagine, oil and gas is huge to Russia's economy. It contributes about 20% to their GDP, and up to 50% of federal revenue has come from oil and gas in past years. If you can take out even 10 to 20% of their capacity, you're going to really hurt the economy and the state's ability to finance the war. They've conducted long-range strikes on refineries and ports to accomplish this, and now they're going after the ships. In November, Ukrainian officials said that naval drones hit 2 sanctioned tankers in the Black Sea as they headed to a Russian port, describing it as part of an effort to put pressure on Russia's oil transportation. Then on December 10th, reporting said Ukrainian sea drones struck and disabled the tanker Deshan as it sailed through Ukraine's exclusive economic zone toward Russia's oil terminal at Novorossiysk. These are the tankers and shipping arrangements used to keep Russian oil moving despite sanctions. From Ukraine's perspective, this is a way to reach beyond the front lines. Ukraine really can't shut down Russia's oil exports with a conventional navy because it doesn't really have one right now. But it can raise the risk and friction for the ships that carry that oil. Ukraine is looking for ways to pressure Russia's war economy. Oil exports matter to that economy, and the shipping piece is one of the places Ukraine can reach. This focus on tankers and sanctions enforcement matters quite a bit for the US military, so now let's discuss that. There are a few takeaways here that matter beyond the headlines. First, this is a reminder that logistics and economies are not separate from military operations. If you can slow down the fuel or make it cost more to move, you can create pressure without hitting a military base. This is precisely the reason the Houthis targeted commercial shipping off the Yemen coast. They wanted to apply pressure to Israel. In many ways, that worked. Second, the US and Ukraine are showing 2 very different toolkits for the same broad problem. The US is using law enforcement and legal authorities to physically enforce sanctions at sea. Ukraine is using uncrewed surface vessels packed with explosives to physically disrupt shipping that supports Russia's export revenue. Third, uncrewed sea drones are not just a Black Sea thing. If a state can build a relatively small explosive boat and guide it into a moving ship, that has implications for any region where ships have to transit choke points or operate close to shore. And that is a problem the US military already lives with in the Persian Gulf, around the Red Sea, and in a potential Pacific fight where a fifth of the world's trade moves through the South China Sea every year. This is what tanker wars do. They turn commercial shipping into a strategic target, and they force military organizations to respond. The reason Tanker War 2.0, or whatever you want to call this, is worth paying attention to is not because tankers are glamorous, it's because they are useful leverage. In the 1980s, tanker attacks pulled the US into escort duty and escalated into Operation Praying Mantis. In 2025, the US is showing that sanctions enforcement can involve physically seizing ships at sea. Ukraine is showing that uncrewed maritime systems can be used to strike the shipping networks that keep an adversary's oil exports or anything moving. Different wars, different methods, but the same basic idea. Oil and a lot of trade still moves by sea, and as long as that's true, tankers and other commercial ships will keep showing up in the strategy conversation, even when nobody wants them to. Let us know what you think in the comments, where I'm sure there will be a lot of comments like, see, it's a war for oil. Well, yeah, no duh, we fight over resources. That's kind of like the whole reason for most of war going through human history. But anyways, we're just doing the same thing that we've always done, just differently. So let us know what you think in the comments. Anything else you got, we just really appreciate it. So thank you for that. Now it's channel update time, and this is our last video that we're going to post before Christmas. So on behalf of the whole team at Task and Purpose, I want to say Merry Christmas to everybody out there. We will not have a video on the 26th, but then we'll be back on the next Tuesday, but then we won't have a video on January 2nd. So a little bit of a break from us, or for us here. It's actually going to be really nice. I'm hoping to just like get a bunch of scripts done so that I don't have to keep like writing these and then going straight into recording. But I've been giving my email out. It's kyle.gunn@taskandpurpose.com. Any service members, veterans, civilians, whoever, the holidays can be kind of rough. I get it. You might be away from home. You might be back home, and that sucks. You might just not enjoy them. If you need something, reach out to me. If you're local to the Eastern North Carolina area, go ahead and reach out. Maybe we can figure something out to do if you're alone and don't have anywhere else to go. That's the least we can do for everybody out there. Other than that, I'll be going to SHOT Show in January, so if there's anything that you all want to see at SHOT Show, please let me know. I'm going to bring all my, camera stuff, do a bunch of interviews with people, get some answers on stuff that I want answers on. So if there's something you guys want to see, let me know. We're going to be going to more of the events, the conferences, the soft week and stuff like that. So we're going to be bringing a lot more, on the ground stuff to you all. So I'm pretty excited for it, but I want to bring you guys stuff that you actually want to see. So let me know what you want to see. Shoot me an email. If you leave it in the comment, I might miss it. We're starting to get more comments, which is a great thing. I just don't have all the time to go through them all. So shoot me an email with what you got to see. Other than that, I don't have a whole lot. Store.taskandpurpose.com if you want to buy this or more. Code BLOCKLEAV for 20% off. If you're watching this after the first of the year, use Actually Watch for 10% off. I'm going to shut up. I'm Kyle, your friendly ginger producer man. You are all dismissed, and I will see you next time. Merry Christmas, and thank you so much for being here.